Hello, I am your favorite sexpert, the Erica Rivera, and you're watching Sexpertise, the sex positive educational show where we aim towards keeping marriages exciting and single people safe. Today, we're going to be talking about a different way to keep people safe. We'll be talking about the complex world of legal rights during childbirth. Our special guest is a medical malpractice and birth injury attorney who devotes his practice to the representation of injured patients and their families. Please welcome Jack Cook. Hey,
Hello.
Jack. Thank
Hey,
you
how's it
so.
going?
It's great. It's great. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you.
Oh, I'm very honored to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. So we normally don't talk about this on Sexpertise, but I think that it's a very important topic, and we should be talking about the safety of expectant mothers. Birth injuries, after all, does have a lot to do with women's health. So let's dive right in. My first question to you is, can you explain what medical malpractice is? Most people may not know, particularly in context of birth injuries, and what are some common types of malpractice cases that you've encountered?
Okay, excellent questions to kick things off.
Yeah.
Medical malpractice is a fancy way of saying doctor, nurse, healthcare provider screwed up, made a mistake. Very particularly, these are mistakes that are unreasonable care. We know that doctors and nurses and midwives and healthcare providers, they're going to make mistakes just like we all make mistakes in our jobs. Some of those mistakes, most of those mistakes don't result in any harm. Some of those mistakes are excusable as okay, they did the reasonable thing, even though it was the wrong decision. So medical malpractice comes down to decisions that are deemed to be unreasonable, which resulted in the harm of or death of the patient. And birth injury is just a little subsection of medical malpractice. All birth injury is medical malpractice, but it very particularly surrounds the pregnant mom and the delivering baby. And the most common cases that you see in birth injury are the most common one is probably mom shows up to the hospital, pregnancy's been fine, baby looks good, but it's a very long and difficult labor. They should make a decision to do a C-section to end that and get the baby out in the world. They don't do that. They either delay doing a C-section or they don't ever do a C-section. And those babies are born with severe brain injuries that happen because they were deprived of oxygen, like during the very difficult labor. And then the other type of cases that I see, I do a lot of work that have to do with babies that get stuck in the birth canal and the midwife or doctors trying to get them out from being stuck. There's a very particular and careful way to do that. If you're not careful and you don't do it the right way, you will actually tear up a baby's nerves in their neck and arm, and the baby will end up with a dysfunctional, non-working arm for their entire life. It's called a
Wow.
brachial plexus injury. And then another subset is moms that are pregnant. Something's going wrong during the pregnancy. They're telling their doctors about it. They're not really being too concerned. And then the mom shows up to the hospital one day and there's no heartbeat, and that's a stillbirth. And they call it a stillbirth because the baby never arrives alive in the world. So sadly, every state in the country does not recognize that as being a baby. They recognize that as a fetus that never had a life. So
Wow.
those children are they can't even bring their own claim. Those are stillbirth cases that a mom has to bring as the same as if she injured her foot. So they just consider it to be an injury of the mother. Father's entitled to some pain and suffering there, but it's pretty sad that as much as there's this push to recognize the sanctity of life from conception, that even babies that die at 40 weeks that are never see, a heartbeat, that's not even considered to have been a baby that lived. So one of the things
Wow.
to fight for. But those are basically the three general areas. And people that call us, it's typically because their spidey sense goes off that I think something went wrong. It just didn't seem right. And a lot of times those people are right. Something did not go right. And
Yeah.
we're able to dig into the records and figure it out and then prosecute those cases.
That is bizarre about the stillbirth and it being treated just like any other injury and not like a human that passed away. That's That's crazy to me. Is there a reason why why staff wouldn't consider a C-section to your first
Well,
point?
yeah, I mean, and it's an excellent question because look, medical malpractice is tough. In many injury cases, like someone slams into you in your car or you're falling someplace, you're not dealing with people who are coming into your life to help you and
Mhm.
to help you stay safe and help your baby come into the world. I mean, people choose to go into obstetrics and nurses choose to be labor nurses because, they want to be part of that.
Mhm.
And so it's very difficult because you're dealing with healthcare providers who have good intentions. Now, when the bad things happen, and the one thing about being in labor, being in this setting that's very beneficial to us as attorneys, this is one of the rarest instances where you're going to be monitoring this baby the entire labor. You have a fetal monitor showing you the baby's heart rate. When things happen on that monitor that are abnormal, it could be a normal finding. Could be the baby's just taking a nap, or it could be that baby's in trouble. So there's a fork in the road. And a lot of times
Oh,
the wait and see attitude is approached. Well, maybe this isn't something that's bad. Maybe this doesn't mean that the baby's compromised. Maybe this doesn't mean the baby's being deprived of oxygen. Maybe these are just normal findings. And sadly, they find out too late that what was on that monitor was actually showing a baby that was being deprived of oxygen in in the womb, and that's what's going to damage their brain. The same as if you and I fell in the water or fell through the ice and we didn't have oxygen, it damages the brain. When the brain doesn't get oxygen for a few minutes, it starts to cause severe and irreversible brain damage. So the babies are relying on that blood coming from the umbilical cord. So if that gets squished or crimped or compressed, which that happens in every labor, but if it
right.
happens too much, then it's going to start damaging the baby. So really, it's just not taking that cautious approach and saying, let's get this baby out of here. And there's some crazy reasons why. You'll hear that hospitals out there pressure the doctors to keep a very low C-section rate, and that has to do with billing. A lot of people that need C-sections, they're lower economic status, they're Medicaid, they're not going to be paying their bills. You do a C-section, you probably have them in the hospital 3, 4 days longer than if they just deliver and go home tomorrow.
Right.
So there's this push, and it's always very problematic to me because pregnancy is this medical condition that a woman has, and that's what it is. It's a medical condition
Mhm.
and it needs to be treated. But it's one of the only medical conditions in the world where we tell women, you don't get to choose how you want to treat this. We're going to tell you how we want to treat it, right?
Yeah,
And
that's a whole conversation in itself too.
but yeah, that's really the reason why they don't do the C-sections is it's the wait and see attitude. We know there's pressure for them not to do the C-section, but in reality, and this is a good tip for your listeners, and I always kind of say this, you should have a conversation with that OB early and say, when will I have the right to choose to have the C-section? And
Right.
if that doctor's answer isn't the first time there's any sign of problems, go find a new OB because there's
Yeah.
plenty out there that are willing to really give mom and dad a lot of say into what they want to do about this. Because the reality is, when you do remove these babies via C section, it almost entirely eliminates their risk of suffering a severe brain injury.
And that's really important. Giving that tip, I'm sure there's others. How can patients and their families protect themselves from those potential medical errors during childbirth? Like, what other steps can they take to make sure that they're getting the best care?
Great question, because I'd rather be out of business on birth injury. I
Mm,
actually speak at nursing conferences every year of labor and delivery nurses who I see across from me in deposition as defendants, and I literally tell them, here's the cases I won last year. Here's where I found the nurses made their mistakes. Please don't make these mistakes again. Don't want to see these brain damaged babies. I'd rather never pick up another one of these cases. But yes, there are things that you can absolutely do to be proactive in this.
mhm.
Number one is you have to always get your medical records and see what they're putting inside there. Because a lot of times they're putting in records stuff that's not happening, stuff that they're just putting in there to check a block. let's just cover my bases, CYA stuff that
Okay.
never happened. Sometimes they're saying that you didn't go get tests done that you did. Sometimes they put in there that you didn't go get a test run and the parent says, well, I never even know they wanted me to have that test. So I always encourage you to get your medical records as you're going along, wait a few days after the appointment, check your My Chart, check a portal. Everyone's got online medical records these days, or request them. Any scans or studies like ultrasounds, always get the report. Don't just sit there and let them tell you what they see on the screen. Get the report and see what the report says. Report might say you're carrying a baby that's in the 99th percentile for weight. That probably is going to want you to have a conversation with your doctor about, is there another way than delivering a 10.5 pound baby vaginally?
Right.
Because they'll leave moms in the dark on this stuff. And then the other thing is just, you know, you don't want to be the pest when you're in that bed and you're the patient, but you've got to make it known that you're paying attention. You've got to ask questions. You got to be nice, but just to let them know that I'm paying close attention. People that end up with bad health care are people that don't speak good English,
Mm.
people that are of lower socioeconomic status, people that kind of just sit in that bed and accept everything they're being told and just kind of nod and wave and smile and wave. Whereas if you're in there being a little bit more inquisitive, a little bit more engaged, then that nurse and that doctor is going to remember, okay, they're keeping tabs here. So
Yeah.
be proactive, understand it's your health, understand it's your baby's health. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. And look, if the worst thing they're going to put in the record is that you're being a pain in the butt, then be the pain in the butt. It's your health and it's your life and it's your baby's life. So rather
Right.
you be a pain in the butt than be a wallflower that just lets bad medicine happen right before your eyes.
Yeah, I've met a lot of clients myself who they don't want to pester. They don't want to pester me. They don't want to pester like their healthcare provider. And like you said, if you show that you're paying attention, they're less likely to pull a fast one on you. Even though it's sad to even think that way, but we know that's the reality. So you might as well, like you said, be the pain in the butt and get the best healthcare possible.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I absolutely encourage you to be nice because
of course,
remember,
of course.
nurses sometimes don't get treated nicely. They certainly don't get treated nicely a lot from doctors. Especially in a labor and delivery setting where it's going to be a nurse in your face 90% of the time. Doctor's going to come in when the baby's head's coming out to catch the baby and be the hero, but 90% of your care is under a nurse. So, be nice to that nurse initially because then she'll want to pop in your room more often and talk to you
Right.
more often and see how you're doing more often and not be the person that's on the list that's like, I'm only going to go in that room and I absolutely have to. We
Right.
have to understand there's bias there. It's a service industry, and anyone in the service industry, we'd certainly try to treat every customer and client the same, but at the end of the day, we're all human. And we may give a squeaky wheel oil, and we may also look at a squeaky wheel and say, that's annoying me too much, and I'm just going to stop looking.
Yeah, you get more with honey than you do with vinegar. Is that the saying? That definitely applies in this case as well.
100%, but don't be afraid to spray that vinegar when you need to.
Yeah, it's a balance. But I'm that was only question two, and I'm already in shock with some of what you've said, and I'm sure our audience is as well. But I'm really glad, really glad you're here today. Um, but we also want to know for families who believe that they've experienced medical malpractice, because you said there's some families that kind of come to you once they have like that inkling. What does the legal process look like? Once they have that gut feeling and they come to you, what should they expect when pursuing a case?
Excellent question. One of the reasons I love this area of law is not a single client that has ever come to me would they would exchange every dollar I've ever won for them for their life back or their baby's life back or their legs back or to not have a brain damaged baby or to not have a child with an arm that doesn't work and won't be able to throw a ball or do a chin up. They give back every dollar I ever won for them. So people call us reluctantly and we get it. And I totally get that. And most people are calling. It's not even about themselves. They just want to make sure that this doesn't happen to somebody else. And I'm so appreciative of that. The good news for everyone is in every state out there, this area of law is covered on contingency contracts, which means you never have to pay a lawyer a thing for them to look under the hood at one of these cases. For that reason, you want to contact attorneys. And if the first one tells you no, then go find a second one, because we know the medical experts disagree on these cases. I mean, every case in existence has qualified experts on opposite sides saying the exact opposite thing, but somehow they're both talking science. And it is science. It's debatable. So the first tip is absolutely contact an attorney, and you want to act quickly. Some states you have 1 year to do something. Other states 2 years. Some have longer. Some you have up till 18 years. But but the lawyers take on everything. The only thing you need to do is give us access to the records. We get them requested. We look at them. We know this medicine very good. We work with some of the top experts in the country. And that's another great thing about this area of law. We're never going to prosecute a case that there's not negligence. We can't move forward unless someone from the medical community looks at those records and they say that there's negligence. They say this baby should have been delivered, and because the baby wasn't, the baby has a severe brain injury or may have died or has the arm injury. They're the ones that have to say it. So it's about contacting an attorney. For those people that are just contemplating, like maybe I want to wait and see, because they will tell you, look, this happens all the time and these kids will get better. And it's shameful that they tell people that, because when you do go home with your newborn, you might not even notice the baby has sustained a brain injury, because what do newborns have to do? They eat, sleep, and poop. That's it.
Right. Right.
That's not a lot of high brain function. So it might not be till a year later when they're not walking, or 2 years later when they're not talking, or when they start having seizures later on. And you're wondering, why is that happening? And you've already forgotten how difficult that labor and delivery was. So I encourage parents that have children that have injuries that happen at birth, immediately get those records, immediately look under the hood and see what's going on. Ask the questions as to how could this have happened? What are the different ways this could have happened? And hopefully they'll be honest with you, but in most cases, honestly, they won't. They're not going to just say to you, oh yeah, we messed this up. We should have delivered your baby sooner. They're just going to send you home with hope that things turn out okay. And if not, sure, you find your way to us. But it's a lengthy process, but it always starts with looking at those records. If the experts can support the case, then we take it into litigation. 90% of these cases settle before they go to trial. So only 10% of them ever have to go to court and go to trial. It's impossible to predict what 10%. So I work up every case if it's going to trial from day one. And, there's not a case that we take on that we're not prepared to take to trial. And the other thing I encourage people is, and I guess this is a little self-serving, find the biggest, baddest law firm out there, biggest billboards, most ads, because this is an arms race. I have spent $500,000 before to just prepare one of these cases for trial because of how expensive the experts are and the cost. But those are all costs that we front, that every lawyer fronts, that you
Okay.
only would have to be responsible for if there's a settlement that's made. And in these cases, if there's a severely brain damaged baby, that's millions of dollars of future medical care. So right off the bat, it could be 10, 12, $15 million of future medical care needed for a baby that's severely injured. That's not even getting into pain and suffering of
Right.
parents, a lifetime of pain and suffering for that. That's just the cost to keep that child alive and healthy.
So it sounds like time is of the essence. And that was actually going to be my next question is I want you to share, because I'm sure you've done, unfortunately, a few of these cases, how these lifelong consequences from birth injuries have impacted some of these families you've worked with, both emotionally and financially.
It's very devastating. Um, this happens disproportionately to people of color, to
Mm,
people who are marginalized, to people who don't speak good English, to people of lower socioeconomic status, people in the LGBT community. It just disproportionately happens. I mean, at least now a lot of nursing organizations like AWAN, which is the Association for Women's Health and Obstetrical and Neonatal Nursing, outstanding organization. I speak at their conventions and conferences. They're pushing hard this, hey, we need to recognize our biases that we've got here, that they're here, they're inherent, just kind of the way even societally we're starting to say we can't keep ignoring the fact that there's bias here. We have to have space where we can talk about our biases and not feel like that every bias graduates into a prejudice. It doesn't, but it's there in the back of your mind.
Right.
And so these injuries, they're devastating. They happen very often to first time parents, and a first time family is thrust into this world where that's their new normal. And it's heartwarming to see how the parents see the children through their eyes, because they love their child as much as any of us love our children, and as much as they do. And you hear them all the time. Like, just, I had one today. She's like, this is my miracle baby. And what she's saying is, even though her baby has a brain injury because they didn't do the C-section on time, 30 minutes more and the baby could have been dead. So she
Right.
actually says that despite bad that happened, but absolutely it can throw you immediately into thrust. Some of these kids, they'll never walk. They'll never talk.
Right.
And they might be the easier ones to take care of. Some of these kids just have severe behavioral problems, like ones where you couldn't, at 8, 9, 10 years old, you'd have to hold their hand, because if you let go of it, they'd run in the middle of the street to pick up a shiny piece of metal in the middle of the road in traffic. No impulse control. And it's not because they're bad behaved, and it's not because parents don't speak English, and it's not because parents may have had a drug or alcohol past. It's because the baby has a brain injury. And when you have a brain injury, your impulse control is, it's damaged, and
Yeah.
you don't have those same safety. And that's a big thing, is these parents are concerned about the safety of their child. And what we're gunning for here is a lifetime's worth of damages, because what's going to be when that brain damaged baby's 40,
Right.
50, 60,
Mm.
right? Mom and dad aren't here anymore. Who's taking care of them? Or are they just another person walking the streets,
Yeah.
homeless because they've got mental health problems that stem from a brain injury, and they're just another person out there mumbling themselves along? So what we're gunning for here is literally life or death, because they get this help and it helps prolong their life, and it helps the parents so that they can just be parents. Because unfortunately, when stuff like this happens, mom and dad don't become mom and dad. They become caretaker. They become nurses. They become aides that help their baby with feedings through tubes, and showers and chairs and sponge baths and medical interventions. And it's awful. It's devastating. It definitely hits them in the pocketbook, but more than that, it upends an entire family. It now
Right.
is the defining thing in this family that they have a severely disabled child. And look, everyone's got those same chances of it happening because stuff happens. But when it's because someone didn't do their job properly, it's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I applaud the courage of the parents that do something about it, because yeah, it can be tough to be in litigation on against this stuff, bringing these lawsuits. They're certainly going to use every wart and scratch and everything in your past. They're going to use that against you. If you're lower socioeconomic, if you're not a high school graduate, they're going to say, well, your child has cognitive problems because you're not a smart person, so they're not a smart person.
Yeah,
And
that's what I was gonna say, is I can only imagine the assumptions. Like, yes, it is a financial hit, a lifelong financial hit, but the emotional hit, the assumptions that could be made about this child or this adult, if they do grow up and they continue to have these mental issues, for example, people are going to make assumptions that have nothing to do with the original diagnosis. And I mean, that is super challenging in itself, or the socioeconomic assumptions, the racial assumptions. Well, it's because you didn't raise them right. You were talking about the behavioral problems, the amount of adversity that you have to fight as a parent. I can only imagine. And I know that you had mentioned earlier some tips on how to avoid, this from happening to begin with. Is there any more advice that you would give expectant parents to help them advocate for themselves and their unborn child during prenatal care and delivery? And, because we have single moms, but I also want to hear too about what the father could possibly do, like in a partnership, in order to advocate for themselves.
um, great questions. And thank goodness for the internet and chat GPT. It can be your best friend There's a lot of information out there about expectant mothers.
Mm-hmm.
Mothers get complacent as they've had one or two kids and it's gone okay. So I
Mm-hmm.
always tell moms, don't do that. Every pregnancy's got to be treated differently. You want to do everything that they're telling you to do, because certainly if you don't, they will use that against you, right? So if they tell you to go get your blood sugar checked, which they do every pregnancy, don't skimp on doing that. Because if you do, and some people do, and then that 10.5 pound baby comes along, they're going to say, well, had you gone for your sugar test, we would have seen that you probably have gestational diabetes and we're headed towards a large baby, right? The other thing to do is, it's still mostly men that are the doctors in this, even though more and more and more women, and soon it's going to be predominantly women that are OBGYNs. But men, um, any man that does not have to crap out a 10-pound watermelon really doesn't have any clue what's going on with a woman when it comes to childbirth. I mean, if men could get pregnant, every delivery would be via C-section and you can get an abortion through the drive-through. Okay. And
I hate to
so
laugh, but you're not
right. It's
wrong.
it's the truth. So
Yeah.
when the doctors are telling, the male experts are telling me that it's not a big deal that a doctor didn't share with the mom that she was carrying a 10-pound baby, that he only had to tell her if she was carrying an 11-pound baby, I'm always just shaking my head like bold words from someone that doesn't have to deliver a 10-pound baby,
Yeah.
because you'd probably be saying differently. Find out how big your baby's going to be. It happens around the same time you find out the sex. You want to get that report. You want to get the ultrasound report and you want to look at two measurements. EFW, estimation of fetal weight. Anything over 90%, you're carrying a large baby and you need to start talking to your doctor, because that substantially increases all types of birth complications if you've got a big baby. The second measurement to look for, it's sometimes overlooked, there'll be a measurement called AC. That's the baby's abdominal circumference, because who cares how big their head is? Their head folds in on itself. Their
Mm-hmm.
shoulders do not. And
Right.
babies that get stuck, it's because their abdomen is wide. You'll see babies that are in the 80 percentile for that EFW, but 99 percentile for how wide their shoulders are. Talk to the doctor about what can we do to help minimize the risks of this,
Yeah.
and just be a little suspicious. Let your spidey senses go off and make sure you've got a good warm fuzzy. Nowadays, the practice model is you go to a doctor's office, they're going to have you see 6 doctors and 3 midwives throughout prenatal care, so that if you go to the hospital and their on-call doctor shows up, it's not the first time you're seeing them. Some people hate that. Oh, I wish I had the same doctor all along. It's actually better,
Mm.
because what if you have the same doctor all along and then that doctor's not the one to come deliver your baby? Your
Right.
anxiety is going to be through the roof. But if it's someone that you've seen before, even if it's just for a visit, you'll have more comfort and familiarity with them. And frankly, they don't need to know much about what happened in your prenatal to deal with you in labor. So just
Yeah.
be proactive. And, as far as what dads can do, dads, you know, sometimes dad's got to be the bad cop here. And sometimes dad does have to be a little assertive here. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not to say to be rude, but certainly I like to see when a guy is there recognizing, and it's awful to be a father in this situation. It really is. I agree. It's worse to be in that bed delivering the baby, but sitting there watching your loved one, your wife, your friend, whatever, helpless, and there's nothing you can do, and they're in that pain. It's tough. It's very tough. You want to be there sharing it with them. But what you can do is be a person that has their eyes open, their ears open. Go out in the hall and talk to the nurse. Ask a lot of questions. If your wife is being mean, she has every right to be with what she's going through. So you be Mr. Nice Guy in that situation.
Yeah.
And if your wife or
Absolutely.
girlfriend or significant other or friend or relative that you're there with, if they're being the wallflower, then you be a little bit more assertive. Kind of like take cues from them, but that's being a good supporting person, is to be there if they're, helping advocate for them.
Absolutely. I think it's really important that even if you are a single mom, that you have a partner in crime, just to be that second set of eyes, second set of ears, like have someone there advocating for you as well. This conversation has been absolutely like eye-opening. I hate that our time is already up. I hate it so much because I'm just sitting here listening intently, like, wow. So I really, really want you to tell our audience how they can get in touch with you, and what's something that you're up to these days.
Up to a lot of things. I'm very excited about, I'm with Morgan and Morgan, and the Morgan family are fantastic. They're wonderful. They're all based here in Florida where I'm at. And, they have just empowered me to go out there and expand our birth injury and birth trauma department and to just basically say, here's a blank check. I don't care how much it costs. Go out there and get justice for these families. And I love that.
Good.
And we're a cool firm. We are the biggest injury firm, but we embrace even new types of lawyers, ones that have tattoos up and down their arms, and and really getting in and trying a bunch of these cases and just not rolling over and whatnot. But so many great things going on, and I can be contacted directly through my social, Jack Cook. It's there at the bottom of the screen, Jack Cook ESQ. Morgan and Morgan, Jack Cook, we have this pound law, the hashtag 529 that you can call. But to any of your listeners, this is like my passion project. And a lot of these cases come directly to me. I'm on the partner level, but I like to talk to all these parents directly. Sometimes I'm just giving them an hour-long explanation as to why you don't have a case, why
Right.
you rest assured that what happened was unavoidable. And sometimes that's what the parents need to hear, to at least give them some solace. But if the answer is it was avoidable, then you've got the full firepower of this law firm behind you. And that's a good thing to
Right.
have because, like I said, it's an arms race. So
Yeah.
I freely give out my cell to people that want to call me on this stuff. So that's 407-412-4500. Some people call me right from the NICU in real time. They've got questions. What should I do? I'm willing to answer any and all those questions. It is being thrown into shark infested waters when this stuff happens. And I like to be the guy there with the paddle, the harpoon gun, and everything that we need to navigate you out of it. So, absolutely, lingering questions or anything, please give me a call. I love the fact that it's happening on this podcast because without sex, there wouldn't be birth injuries. So, it's kind of
Absolutely.
the starter of the entire thing. It's the fun part about, making the babies and whatnot. And it factors very predominantly into what we do because this is really just the continuation of really that spiritual union. And that's why when things go bad, it it hurts.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
we're there to help with the boo-boos on that. So
Well, thank you so, so much. And to our listeners, the resource is there. That's what we're trying to do. We're bringing that to you. So make sure to stay in touch with Jack and continue to stay curious, stay safe, and stay informed. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jack.